Parkour is a discipline of movement which allows you to use obstacles in your path which typically channel you or constrain you, using those to create movement by using a series of techniques like climbing, running, jumping, vaulting and such.
Over the last couple of years, people are now starting to see parkour as a thing for development, and it's good for people instead of it's just jumping off roofs and it's doing crazy stuff. So it's definitely growing. As I teach classes with kids, and it's ever getting bigger. It's also one of the most transferable skills you can transfer, not just sports but to any daily task. The benefits are massive: confidence, strength, agility, control of fear. It's amazing. It's an amazing sport.
We've just seen in the city centre the reviews scaling really high buildings in the city centre where there's public below them. What can security do to ensure that things like these don't happen?
In terms of what can be done to avoid this, I think it's more to do with education of individuals as opposed to education of security, for example. In terms of climbing onto private property, high rooftops and such, that's not something that we condone, very certainly not on private property. In terms of height training, a lot of people who watch the media associate parkour very heavily with training at height and rooftops because they're the most spectacular things to see, but it's really not what the discipline is about in any shape or form. The recent news story painted it as some sort of a new berserk craze, I think was the actual quote. It's anything but new. I mean, in terms of the grand scheme, it's in its infancy, but parkour has been around as we know it for more than 30 years, 35 years. I've been practicing for 13. As I mentioned, accessibility, it's not a discipline that requires equipment. You don't need to buy anything expensive in order to practice it. You need nothing more than your imagination and a sense of, I suppose, self-awareness, as well as self-respect and also self-confidence in order to try and progress in your movements. And we live in a playground, we live in an urban playground. It's the most wonderful place to practice. Every corner you turn is a potentially disused space by the public, but it's a space that we value more than anyone else.
People think parkour is jumping off roofs or vandalism, stuff like that, which is just far from it. You have to just go and test the areas. Clearly not climbing into the private areas. Obviously we try not to do that as much as possible, but there's so much surroundings. You don't need a lot to do parkour. So you go in. If a security guard asks you to leave, you leave nicely and try to find another spot.
For those individuals who are at a high altitude and high rooftops and buildings, it's often easy to forget that there are people below them who can be damaged by a slip or a fall, or even from a falling piece of stone or anything that comes off the rooftop. Do you think that they can sometimes forget about those who are on the ground?
Well, I would disagree completely in the sense that if you're up in a level like that and if you're an experienced dresseur, someone who practices parkour, those things are actually paramount. So before you go to any sort of training location, if you happen to be at height, the first case is always safety, not only of the individual but of the people around them. At ground level, this manifests in walking up to a railing and testing that railing to make sure it's secure before you jump on it. If we train, myself and my colleague as well, Paul, who's here, if we train together and we're in a position that is particularly busy with public, we will spot for each other and we will make sure that landing areas are clear before we jump and move. In terms of practicing parkour, your relationship with the surroundings as well as the public in those environments are paramount. So with experience comes that awareness, and that's something we like to educate younger practitioners on as well. In terms of our coaching endeavours, it's something that we both try and impart.
People don't understand what training we go through to be able to do those sort of movements. They don't ask. They don't look into why are these people doing this training. They just see it for danger, for the sake of danger.
I think if you were to come across a group of individuals in the street who are practicing something a little bit different or are using movements that you're a little unsure about, I think the first thing I would encourage people to do is talk to those individuals, because 9 times out of 10, if you're speaking to an actual parkour practitioner, I guarantee you 10 times out of 10 you'll have a very polite conversation. They'll explain what they're doing, and hopefully you'll leave with some sense of what they're actually trying to achieve at that point, rather than walking past and seeing someone impotently jumping onto a wall over and over and you may not understand the training motivation. Having a quick conversation and understanding why that person is trying to do that can make all the difference.
How can people who are interested in it receive the proper training that they need to go off and do this?
I work with Belfast Parkour Limited, and I teach predominantly adult classes on weekend times. My website would be based on Twitter. It's at Belfast Parkour. And there's also Jump NI, NVTV.co.uk, I believe as well, which Paul Allen works with. Whilst we would certainly encourage formal training, you need to do nothing more than open your back door and walk into your yard. As long as you have a healthy respect for your own limitation, you have a healthy respect for your ability, and you build very slowly, there's nothing stopping you beginning your journey personally just by looking around and having some fun. We see parents who lead their children down on tops of walls every day of the week. They hold their hand, they let them down, and they set them down at the end. It's about cultivating that mindset once more of exploring and using a public space in a safe way, but in a way that adults are generally frowned upon doing, and we wish to challenge that and ask why.